He built a life where every second counted, every deal closed, every emotion buried, until one ordinary afternoon, two little boys with a torn teddy bear stopped him in his tracks. What started as a detour became the moment that unraveled everything he thought he knew about success, love, and the family he never knew he had. Evan Harper didn't believe in stopping. Not for red lights, not for birthdays, not for sleep. His world ran on deadlines, back-to-back meetings, and the silent hum of his phone buzzing against his wrist every 5 minutes. He had built his empire on efficiency and precision, cutting through deals like a surgeon, quick, clean, and emotionally removed. On that particular afternoon, he was running late to a critical investor dinner, the kind that came with cameras and champagne flutes and the illusion of warmth behind tailored suits. His driver took a shortcut through a quieter street, and Evan, glued to his phone, barely looked up until the car slowed. "Everything okay?" he asked, eyes still locked on a contract draft. The driver hesitated. "There are 2 kids, sir. On the curb. One of them's crying." Evan sighed and was about to dismiss it when something told him to look. Just a glance. And that glance stopped him. 2 little boys sat near a cracked sidewalk, no adults in sight. One of them was hugging a torn teddy bear, his face red and wet with tears. The other boy had his arm around him, eyes narrowed not in fear, but fierce protection. Evan stared. He didn't know why, but he opened the car door without thinking. He walked toward them, his shadow stretching across the pavement in the golden light of late afternoon. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down. "Are you okay?" The boy with the dry face spoke. "He tore bear. On accident. Now he's sad." Evan blinked. "Bear?" The sobbing twin turned the toy toward him. It was an old plush bear, seam split down the middle, one button eye missing. Its stuffing peeked through like a wound. Evan felt something twist inside him. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not pity. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. "Is bear yours?" he asked. Both boys nodded. Evan glanced back at his car, at the open door and the flashing phone on the seat. Then he looked back at them. "What's your name?" "I'm Lucas," said the dry-eyed one. "He's Liam." Lucas and Liam, Evan repeated slowly. The names sank into him. He paused, then said, "How about we go get bear fixed?" Liam sniffed and looked up. "Really?" Evan nodded. "Really. My car's right there." Lucas hesitated. "We're not supposed to go with strangers." Evan smiled a little. "That's smart. I'm Evan. I'm not scary, just really, really late all the time." Lucas gave him a skeptical once-over, then looked at Liam. Liam nodded. Evan took them to a toy store 2 blocks away. It wasn't planned. It wasn't on his calendar. But he walked through the aisles with 2 5-year-old boys who bickered over whether bear would prefer a new bow tie or a bandage. In the end, they chose a new bear, but Liam wouldn't let go of the old one. Evan paid for both. "Where do you live?" he asked once they were outside. "Right there," Lucas said, pointing toward a row of modest homes across the street. He walked them to the door, carrying the new bear and helping Liam hold on to the old one. Lucas rang the bell. The door opened. And Evan's entire world flipped. Because standing there, in a faded sweater and shock in her eyes, was Olivia Bennett. She looked older, maybe thinner, but still her. Still the woman he'd walked away from 6 years ago because he believed timing mattered more than love. She stared at him. "Evan?" His voice caught before he could answer. She looked down at the boys, then back up at him. He suddenly couldn't breathe. Because in Lucas and Liam's eyes, in the shape of their noses and the angle of their jaws, he saw himself. And for the first time in years, Evan Harper was completely, utterly unprepared. Olivia didn't move. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand gripping the edge of the frame, the other resting lightly on the side of her hip as if she needed something to ground her. Her eyes flicked between Evan and the two boys at his side, trying to make sense of the scene in front of her. Evan didn't speak. He couldn't. His mouth was dry, his thoughts a blur. He hadn't seen her in years, not since the night she walked out of his penthouse without raising her voice, without slamming the door, just a quiet and final goodbye that he'd told himself not to chase. Now she was standing inches from him, and two small children, children who looked so much like him it made his chest ache, were between them. Lucas was the first to break the silence. "Mommy, this is Evan." He helped fix Bear. His voice was casual, as if the weight of the moment didn't belong to him. Olivia's gaze dropped to the stuffed toy clutched in Liam's arms, now partially restuffed and tied together with ribbon from the toy store. Her eyes welled up briefly before she blinked it away. "Come in," she said, stepping back. The boys ran inside without hesitation, leaving the door open behind them. Evan followed slowly, as though each step inside her house peeled back another layer of the man he used to be. The interior was modest, warm, lived in. There were children's books on the couch, toy trucks in the hallway, and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of life, something his own home had never been. She offered him a seat, but he remained standing. She didn't push. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, folding her hands as if preparing for a conversation she had rehearsed in her mind many times but hoped would never happen. "You didn't know," she said, not accusing, not soft, just stating it plainly. "No," Evan said, his voice finally finding its way back to him. "I didn't." He looked around again, at the signs of their life, of everything that had grown in his absence. "They're mine, aren't they?" Olivia looked away for a second. "Yes." She didn't elaborate, didn't justify, didn't apologize. "After I left, I found out I was pregnant. I thought about telling you, more than once. But I remembered who you were back then. What your world looked like." He swallowed. "You thought I wouldn't want them. I knew you wouldn't know what to do with them," she said. "You were always chasing something. I didn't want to hand you two children and hope you would choose them over $1 billion deal. You didn't even give me a chance," he said, not bitter, but stunned. "I gave you 6 years of silence," she replied. "You never came looking. Not even once." He had no defense. She was right. He had buried that part of his life, convinced himself she was just a missed opportunity, not a forever one. "What are they like?" he asked quietly. Olivia softened. "Lucas is bold. Always talking, always leading. Liam is gentler. Quiet, but sharp. They're both curious and kind. They're everything." Evan nodded slowly. "They're incredible." There was a pause between them. Not tense. Just full. "I didn't keep them from you out of spite," she said. "I kept them safe. I kept them small, and happy, and whole. I did what I thought was right." He sat down, finally, and looked her in the eye. "Do they know who I am?" She hesitated. "No. They just met a man today who helped with a toy. That's all they need right now." Evan nodded again, more slowly this time. He didn't know what to feel. Guilt and awe and disbelief twisted together. "What do you want from me?" he asked, but there was no edge in the question. Olivia looked tired. "I don't want anything. I don't need your money. I've built this life for them, and it works. But if you're going to be around, you have to mean it. You don't get to come and go." He met her gaze. "I don't want to go. I just don't know how to stay." Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture eased. "Then you can start by coming back tomorrow." He stood up, walked to the door, then turned around. "I'll be here at 9. This time, Olivia didn't nod or smile. She just watched him go, and when the door closed behind him, she exhaled the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for 6 years. Evan arrived the next morning 10 minutes early. He parked 2 houses down and sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. He wasn't sure why he was nervous. He had walked into multi-million-dollar meetings with less hesitation, but standing on Olivia's porch with his hands in his pockets, he felt something unfamiliar creeping under his skin. He rang the doorbell once and heard footsteps inside. When the door opened, it wasn't Olivia who greeted him. It was Lucas, still in his pajamas, holding a cereal bowl in one hand and a plastic dinosaur in the other. "You said 9, Lucas said, squinting at him like a tiny manager checking attendance. Evan smiled. "I know. I was early." Lucas nodded once, satisfied. "Come in. We're eating breakfast." He turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. Evan stepped inside and closed the door behind him, still adjusting to how quickly he'd gone from stranger to tolerated presence. The smell of toast and maple syrup filled the air. Liam sat at the kitchen table with his chin resting on one hand, staring into a bowl of cereal, half awake and blinking slowly. Olivia stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with a casual ease that made the whole place feel like a world far removed from Evan's. She glanced over her shoulder when she heard him come in and gave him a slight nod. No smile, no words, just acknowledgement. He offered to help, awkwardly, but she waved him toward the coffee pot instead. "If you want to be useful, pour yourself a cup and survive their morning energy." Evan poured coffee and sat across from Liam, who studied him for a second, then pushed a small toy truck across the table without a word. Evan picked it up and examined it like it was fragile glass. "Cool truck," he said, and Liam gave a tiny smile before going back to his cereal. Over the next 20 minutes, Evan helped clean syrup off the table, put away dishes, and watched Lucas give an overly dramatic retelling of how Bear was almost beyond repair but saved by the power of teamwork. Olivia didn't interfere. She let the boys speak, corrected them gently, and let Evan fumble through figuring out where the forks went. It was the most domestic thing he had done in a decade, and it felt strange, almost dreamlike. And yet, not unpleasant. When the boys went to the living room to build a fort out of blankets and couch cushions, Evan stayed behind to help Olivia finish tidying up. The silence between them wasn't tense, it was cautious. Like neither of them knew what version of themselves they were supposed to be now. "I didn't expect you to come back," Olivia said finally, wiping crumbs into her palm and brushing them into the sink. "I didn't expect to want to," Evan admitted, watching her carefully. "But I did. I still do." She rinsed her hands and turned to him. "You're not here for me, Evan. You're here for them. Don't confuse the two." "I know," he said quietly. "But that doesn't make this any less overwhelming." "It is overwhelming," she agreed. "For me too. But I've had 5 years to learn how to survive it. You haven't." Evan looked down at his hands. "I don't even know how to be around them. They ask me things I don't know how to answer." "Then don't pretend," she said. "They don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be here when you say you will." He nodded, absorbing that like advice he wasn't sure he deserved. "Can I see them again tomorrow?" She hesitated for a second, then said, "Only if you help fold the laundry this time." He almost laughed. "Deal." Later that day, as he left the house, Lucas ran after him barefoot with Bear in one hand and a small, crumpled drawing in the other. "This is for you," he said, handing it over. Evan took the paper carefully and unfolded it. It was a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, with a brown scribble next to them labeled Bear. Underneath, in blocky kid handwriting, was the word us. Evan didn't know what to say. He knelt down slowly and looked Lucas in the eyes. "Thank you. I'll keep it forever." Lucas grinned. "You better." I used my best crayons. Evan stood, folded the drawing like it was gold, and walked back to his car. He didn't turn on the engine right away. He sat there, staring at the picture in his hands, and felt something shift in his chest, not quickly, not all at once, but undeniably. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to be anywhere else. By the end of the week, Evan had visited 4 times. Each time felt a little less foreign, a little more like something he was allowed to step into. The boys began to expect him, not just as the man who brought toys or helped clean up spilled juice, but as someone who was simply there. They called for him when they wanted something off the top shelf or when the blanket fort collapsed. Lucas started climbing into his lap without asking first. Liam began whispering secrets to him, the kind that only made sense to 5-year-olds but still felt like trust. Evan didn't know how to name the feeling it gave him, maybe it was joy, maybe guilt, maybe something that hadn't fully formed yet, but he welcomed it. Olivia remained cautious. She didn't let her guard down easily, and Evan understood that. He had earned her distance. Still, she was fair. She didn't shut him out. In the quiet moments between the chaos of the kids and the routines of daily life, they sometimes found themselves standing near each other for just a second too long, exchanging looks that felt full of history and hesitation. Evan didn't push. He knew this wasn't about reclaiming the past. This was about building something new, even if it started from broken pieces. One afternoon, Olivia was folding laundry on the living room floor while Evan helped the boys assemble a complicated pirate ship made of plastic and too many instructions. Liam lost a piece and began to cry in frustration, but Evan sat beside him and said, "It's okay. We'll find it. Or we'll make a new one." Liam didn't argue. He just leaned against Evan's side quietly until Lucas returned triumphantly with the missing piece. Olivia watched all of it silently, then returned to her folding, her eyes softer than usual. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Olivia offered him tea. It was the first time she'd done so, and he didn't miss the gesture. They sat in the kitchen, the lights low, voices quiet so as not to wake the kids. Evan sipped the tea and looked around the space, small, a little cluttered, but warm. He realized how empty his own penthouse felt in comparison. "You're good with them," she said eventually, not looking at him. "I'm trying," he answered. "I think I'm still scared I'll mess it up." "You will," she said plainly. "But they'll forgive you if you show up the next day anyway." He nodded, letting the truth of that settle inside him. "Why didn't you ever try to contact me?" "I wanted to," she admitted. "So many times. But you were in every headline, every article. I watched you fly around the world, close deals, win awards. I didn't want to be the person who dragged you into something you didn't choose." "But I would've," he said softly, not even sure if it was the truth or something he desperately wanted to believe. She looked at him now. "Would you? Back then? You didn't even stop me when I left." He had no defense. He had been selfish, so obsessed with control and achievement that he didn't even notice when someone like Olivia slipped out of his life. "I wasn't ready," he said. "But I am now." Her eyes didn't soften, but she nodded slightly. "They need stability. If you want to be here, be here. But don't make them fall in love with you only to walk away." "I won't," he said, meaning it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. There was another pause between them, but it was no longer heavy. It was thoughtful, even a little hopeful. They finished their tea in silence, and when he left that night, she walked him to the door. As he stepped outside, she said, "Same time tomorrow?" He turned, met her gaze, and replied, "Earlier, if you'll let me." That night, as he drove home, Evan didn't turn on the radio. He didn't check his phone. He didn't return the 3 emails his assistant had sent marked urgent. Instead, he rolled down the window and let the night air rush in, realizing for the first time that slowing down didn't mean losing control. Sometimes, it meant finally choosing the right things. Evan started arriving earlier each morning. At first, it was just to help Olivia with breakfast or the morning rush of getting the boys dressed and ready, but soon it became more than that. He began picking up little things on the way over, juice boxes they liked, band-aids with cartoon characters, socks that matched because Olivia always seemed to be looking for a missing pair. He noticed everything now, not just what was said but what was left unsaid, the tiredness in her eyes, the moments when the boys fought and she didn't have the energy to step in, the way she pressed a hand to her forehead when no one was looking. Evan started filling those spaces. Not all at once, and not perfectly, but with genuine effort. He would read to the boys while Olivia showered or cleaned the kitchen while they watched cartoons. Sometimes he didn't do anything at all except sit quietly and let the house breathe around him, no meetings, no calls, just presence. But everything started to shift when Olivia got sick. It was subtle at first. A headache she brushed off, a lingering cough, a few missed meals. Evan noticed, but she waved him off with a tired smile and told him she just needed sleep. A few days later, she collapsed in the hallway while putting away laundry. Evan caught her before she hit the floor, his heart racing as he laid her down and called her name. The boys ran in, confused and scared, and he told them everything was okay even though his hands were shaking. He called an ambulance. Olivia came to before they arrived, but she was pale and weak and too quiet. She tried to argue with the paramedics, tried to tell them she didn't need to go, but Evan stepped in and made the decision she couldn't. He held her hand the entire ride to the hospital, even when she squeezed it a little too tightly. The diagnosis wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious, an untreated infection, worsened by exhaustion, stress, and not enough self-care. The doctor looked at Evan as if he was the husband and explained everything in a tone reserved for family. Evan didn't correct him. He listened, asked questions, and signed papers when Olivia was too tired to hold a pen. She was admitted for a short stay. Rachel, the neighbor, agreed to watch the boys while Evan stayed at the hospital. He didn't leave her side. He pulled a chair next to her bed and sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the machines that beeped and the 4-bag that dripped slowly. Olivia slept, her face soft and vulnerable in a way he had never seen. He couldn't stop thinking about how close he had come to losing this, the life he had only just started to touch. When she woke up, her eyes found his instantly. "You stayed," she murmured, voice dry and raspy. He nodded. "Of course I did." "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." She closed her eyes again, and her fingers searched for his. He let her take his hand, and they stayed like that, silent but understood. That night, after she fell asleep again, Evan walked out into the hospital corridor. He leaned against the wall, pulled out his phone, and stared at it. Dozens of missed calls. Meetings rescheduled. A stockholder meeting he was supposed to lead. All of it had gone on without him, and for the first time, he didn't feel panic. He felt clarity. He typed a single message to his assistant: "Pause everything. Family comes first." Then he turned the phone off. Back at Olivia's bedside, he unfolded a blanket and sat back down, this time with a steadier heart. He realized he wasn't afraid of this life anymore. He was afraid of not choosing it. He was afraid of letting it slip away while he chased things that would never hold his hand at 3 a.m. Olivia stirred in her sleep and whispered something he couldn't quite make out. He leaned in, brushing her hair from her forehead, and whispered back, "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, he meant it with every piece of who he was. Olivia stayed in the hospital for 4 days. During that time, Evan stepped into a version of himself he never knew existed. He woke the boys up each morning, made them cereal, tried and failed to comb their hair evenly, and let them wear mismatched socks when they insisted it was part of their style. He walked them to preschool, held their hands as they crossed the street, and tried to hide how nervous he was about doing it all wrong. But the boys didn't seem to notice. Lucas told him stories the entire way, about a magic lizard with flying powers, while Liam quietly picked flowers and handed them to Evan one by one. At the end of every day, Evan sat in the hospital next to Olivia's bed, updating her on everything, what the boys ate, what they argued about, the exact shape of the cloud Liam said looked like a dinosaur. She smiled, weak but warm, and listened like it was the most important briefing she'd ever received. The nurses began to talk. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, whispered to Evan one evening, "You're doing better than most dads who've been doing this for years." He didn't know how to respond to that, because he still felt like he was learning how to breathe in this new life. He hadn't signed a single contract, hadn't checked the market in days, and he didn't miss any of it. Instead, he found himself looking at the clock every few hours, counting down the minutes until he could be back at her side, or back with the boys building pillow forts and burning grilled cheese. On the last night before Olivia was discharged, she turned toward him in the dark room. Her voice was stronger now, but quiet. "You didn't have to step in like this." "I know," Evan said, shifting in the chair. "But I wanted to." "I kept them from you," she whispered, eyes on the ceiling. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Maybe I wasn't." Evan leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You were. Back then, I wasn't ready. I would have ruined everything. But now I'm here. And I want to be their dad. Not just the guy who shows up when it's convenient. I want to be in their lives. All the way." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw that mix of fear and hope in her eyes. "That means letting them love you. Letting them expect things from you. You know that, right?" "I do," he said. "And I want that more than I've ever wanted anything." She didn't say anything after that. She just reached for his hand again and held it, her grip stronger than the first time. When he left the room that night, he passed a small window at the end of the hallway. He stopped, stared out at the streetlights, and for a long time, he didn't think about work or power or success. He thought about how much he had missed, and how much more he was finally ready to fight for. The next morning, he brought her home. The boys had made a giant welcome sign that was half crayons, half glitter, and completely crooked. They threw their arms around her as if she'd been gone a year, not 4 days. Evan watched them, his heart full and aching at once. He helped her to the couch, fluffed the pillows, brought her tea. She didn't resist this time. She let him help. That afternoon, while the boys napped in a tangle of limbs and stuffed animals, Evan sat with Olivia in the kitchen. She looked tired but peaceful, the sunlight warming her face through the window. "They love you already," she said softly. "They're just too young to know how rare that is." "I don't take it for granted," he said. "I don't take any of this for granted." She smiled at him, and for the first time, it didn't feel guarded. "So what now?" He exhaled slowly. "Now I make sure I never give them a reason to question that I'm staying." And he meant it. Every word. Every breath. Because for once, Evan Harper wasn't chasing something more. He had already found it. He just needed to hold on. The following weeks moved in quiet, steady waves, no longer defined by chaos or crisis but by the kind of normalcy Evan had never experienced before. He started staying for dinner more often, sometimes helping Olivia cook, sometimes sitting with the boys while they waited for food, teaching them how to count using forks and napkins or helping Liam sound out new words. He wasn't perfect. He still burned toast, still occasionally said the wrong thing or forgot to pack snacks, but each day he stayed, each morning he showed up again, something inside the boys seemed to settle. They laughed louder, clung to his leg a little longer when he tried to leave, began to look for him first when something exciting or scary happened. The house started to absorb his presence as if it had always made space for him. One evening after dinner, while Lucas and Liam were building towers out of cereal boxes and giggling over whether Daddy Evan could build one taller, Olivia called him into the kitchen. She had her phone in her hand, her expression unreadable. She handed it to him without a word. On the screen was a headline, his name, his company, and a photograph of him holding Liam outside the preschool. The article speculated about his disappearance from the corporate spotlight, about the identity of the children, and whether the shift in his priorities meant instability within the Harper Group. He read the first few lines and stopped. His jaw tightened, but not in anger. He handed the phone back to her and leaned against the counter. "Are you going to lose everything because of this?" she asked, carefully, like she already knew the answer but needed him to say it out loud. "Maybe," he said. "Some of it, probably. The board's been circling. Investors don't like surprises. My absence isn't convenient for them. And you're okay with that?" "I didn't used to be. But now?" He looked through the doorway where the boys were laughing, climbing into a pillow fort that had half collapsed. "Now I think I finally understand what it means to be rich. It's not in numbers or control. It's in showing up, being needed, being loved without earning it. I never had that before. I don't care if they take my title. I've already traded it for something better." Olivia stared at him, the weight of his words resting between them. For so long, she had held the burden of raising their children, of keeping them safe and loved without help. Now, for the first time, she believed she might not have to do it alone anymore. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Olivia and Evan sat on the couch with a blanket over their legs and the sound of the city humming faintly outside the window. There was no need to fill the silence. But she broke it anyway. "I spent so long convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That letting someone back in would only cost me more than I had left to give." "I know," he said. "I did the same thing with my own life. Only my version was built out of contracts and corner offices." She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "And now? Now I want the mess. The noise. The mornings with syrup on the floor and toy dinosaurs in the sink. I want all of it. I want them. And I want you, if you'll let me." Her expression didn't shift dramatically. There was no sudden tear, no cinematic gasp. Just a long breath. Then she leaned in, placed her hand over his, and rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm not promising easy," she said. "I'm not asking for easy," he replied. "I'm asking for real." And that night, with the streetlight casting soft shadows through the blinds and the weight of two small bodies asleep down the hall, something between them quietly changed. It wasn't a beginning. It wasn't a return. It was something new. Something stronger. Something earned. Fall settled in slowly, painting the trees in warm shades of amber and rust, and the world around them seemed to quiet just enough for Evan to realize how far he had come. The boys had begun kindergarten, their backpacks slightly too big for their shoulders, their laughter echoing down sidewalks as they raced to school every morning with Evan walking behind them, holding their lunchboxes and trying to keep up. Olivia returned to work part-time, taking on small design projects from home, her spark returning more and more each day. The chaos in their home never disappeared, it was loud and messy and alive, but for Evan, it had become the only kind of success that mattered. He didn't return to the Harper Group. When the board tried to lure him back with offers and restructured contracts, he declined. There was no bitterness in his refusal, only clarity. The company had been his identity for so long that walking away should have felt like failure. But it didn't. It felt like freedom. He redirected his energy into smaller projects, local startups, nonprofits, things that allowed him to stay close to home. It wasn't the empire he once chased, but it was something he built with purpose. Something he could leave behind with pride. One afternoon, he stood in the kitchen helping the boys decorate cookies shaped like pumpkins, their hands covered in frosting and sugar, their laughter loud and uninterrupted. Liam insisted that Bear needed a cookie too, placing a small one in front of the old plush toy, still patched but well loved. Lucas explained that the orange sprinkles were magic, and if Daddy ate them, he would never be tired again. Evan pretended to be amazed, exaggerating every bite until both boys collapsed into giggles. Olivia watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a smile tugging at her lips, and in her eyes was something unspoken, recognition, peace, maybe even love. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed and the kitchen was clean again, Evan handed Olivia a small box. She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "What's this?" she asked, but there was a softness in her voice. He shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "Something small." She opened it slowly, and inside was a key. Not shiny and new, but worn slightly at the edges. "It's to the house 2 blocks from here," he said. "I bought it last week. Not to take you away from this place, but to grow into something bigger. Something that's ours. If you want it." Olivia stared at the key for a long moment, then looked up at him. "You really aren't going anywhere, are you?" He stepped closer. "Not unless you kick me out." She smiled, the kind of smile that started in her eyes and settled into her chest. "Then I guess we better start packing." Months passed, then a year. The house became a home. The boys flourished, their rooms painted in their favorite colors, filled with books and stuffed animals and small, chaotic dreams. Evan found peace in the quiet mornings, the smell of pancakes, the way Olivia reached for his hand when no one else was looking. He wasn't the same man who once rushed through life, always chasing the next deal. He was slower now, more deliberate, and far more present. One night, as they sat in the backyard under a sky full of stars, the boys asleep upstairs and the world soft around them, Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. He looked at her, the woman who had once walked away to protect her children, and whispered, "You saved me, you know." She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered back, "No. You showed up. You saved yourself." He held her hand tighter and closed his eyes, the cool breeze brushing against his skin. He finally understood what it meant to be full, not of success or status, but of meaning, of family, of quiet moments that made a life. And in that stillness, Evan knew he had everything he'd ever been searching for. He just hadn't known it looked like this.